The Rise Beyond the Fall. Part 1. The Golden Cage. Jonathan Rhys had everything a man could dream of: money, power, and prestige. At 39, he was the CEO of one of the largest real estate empires in New York City. His face often graced the covers of business magazines, and his name was synonymous with success. His penthouse overlooked Central Park, his garage housed luxury cars, and his days were filled with champagne brunches, boardroom victories, and parties in the Hamptons. But behind his custom-tailored suits and billion-dollar smile was a man slowly losing touch with reality. Jonathan didn't come from wealth. He was born in a rundown neighborhood in Brooklyn, the son of a janitor and a waitress. He clawed his way up through grit, ambition, and relentless work. By the time he was 25, he'd flipped his first building. By 30, he had over 100 employees. Somewhere along the way, he started believing he was untouchable. That was his first mistake. The second was trusting people who didn't deserve it. The third was cutting corners, just small ones at first, but they grew. A missed permit here, a silent bribe there. As long as the deals kept flowing and the press stayed positive, no one seemed to care, until they did. One brisk morning in November, everything changed. Jonathan was sipping his coffee in his penthouse when the FBI stormed in. Accused of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy, he watched his empire collapse in a matter of weeks. His assets were frozen. His friends vanished. His fiancée returned her ring. The media turned savage. At his trial, Jonathan remained stoic, but inside he was crumbling. The judge's words hit him like a brick to the chest. 10 years in federal prison. His hands were cuffed. The courtroom blurred as reporters screamed his name. Just like that, Jonathan Rhys, the golden boy of real estate, was gone. The prison gates closed behind him with a finality he couldn't comprehend. The cold metal bed, the orange jumpsuit, the loss of all control, it crushed him. The first nights were the hardest. He thought about ending it all. He'd lost everything: his money, his dignity, his purpose. But somewhere deep in the silence of those endless prison nights, something stirred inside him. A flicker of the boy who once believed he could build a better life, not just for himself, but for others too. That's when Jonathan decided, this isn't the end, it's the beginning. Part 2. The Breaking Point. Prison was a different universe. Gone were the suits and the spotlight. In their place were gray walls, rough men, and a daily routine designed to strip away every ounce of identity. Jonathan, once accustomed to choosing lobster or filet mignon, now lined up for lukewarm stew and stale bread. At first, he refused to adapt. He stayed quiet, avoided contact, and kept his eyes on the ground. But prison had its own rules, and the week didn't last long. Within the first month, he got into a fight. It wasn't much, just a disagreement over a seat, but fists flew. His nose bled, his ribs ached for days, and he was thrown into solitary for a week. It was in that windowless room that something inside him broke. Or maybe something inside him woke up. He looked at the cracks in the walls, the darkness, the echo of his breath. And then he asked himself a question he hadn't in years. Who am I when I have nothing? He realized he didn't know. Part 3. Seeds in Concrete. When he was released from solitary, Jonathan took a different approach. He stopped trying to be invisible. Instead, he started reading everything he could get his hands on: economics, psychology, ethics, even classic literature. His roommate Darrell, a quiet man serving 15 years, introduced him to meditation and journaling. Jonathan wrote pages each night reflecting on his choices, his ego, and the people he had hurt. He began to see how arrogance had blinded him, how his hunger for success had made him cut corners, break laws, and betray his own values. He signed up for every prison program available: anger management, business ethics, even GED tutoring, just to be useful. He taught finance classes to inmates who barely knew how to open a bank account. He helped others write resumes, taught them interview skills, and even led a weekly seminar called Second Chances. The warden noticed. "You're not like most," the warden said one day. "I think you might actually make it." Jonathan just smiled. "I don't plan to survive this place. I plan to grow from it." Part 4. Release. 7 years into his 10-year sentence, Jonathan was released early for good behavior. He stepped out of prison with $83 to his name, no home, and no one waiting. He walked through the gates with a single duffel bag and a notebook filled with plans. His first stop was a shelter. He volunteered in exchange for a bed and food. Then he found work as a dishwasher at a small diner. He kept his head down, saved every penny, and spent his evenings planning a new kind of business, one that didn't cut corners, one that made life better for others, not just himself. His idea was simple but powerful: a housing project built by former inmates for former inmates, affordable rent, job training, financial literacy classes, all bundled into one. He called it the Phoenix Project. Part 5. The Climb. Securing funding was nearly impossible. Banks laughed him out the door. Investors walked away the moment they Googled his name. But Jonathan didn't stop. He spoke at recovery meetings, prison re-entry programs, and churches. Slowly, he built a network. One day, a local pastor offered him a small abandoned church building and a $10,000 donation to start his project. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jonathan worked 14-hour days cleaning, fixing, painting. He converted the basement into classrooms. Volunteers helped with plumbing and wiring. The first 3 residents, men he had mentored in prison, moved in that winter. From there, word spread. Donations grew. A local journalist did a story on him titled "From Convict to Creator." Suddenly, doors opened. Grants followed. Investors saw the value in giving people a second chance. Within 5 years, Jonathan had built 5 housing centers across 3 cities. Each one was staffed by former inmates. Each one helped reduce homelessness, crime, and relapse. He was invited to speak at universities. He was honored by the governor. He even returned to the same courtroom where he had once been sentenced, not in handcuffs, but as a guest speaker on redemption. Part 6. The Return. 10 years after his release, Jonathan stood in front of a newly built complex in the Bronx. It had 60 units, a community garden, and a rooftop workspace for small business startups. Former inmates who once had nothing were now barbers, bakers, and mechanics, many of whom had families living with them. Jonathan's mother, now in her 70s, stood beside him that day. She looked up at the building, tears in her eyes. "I always knew you'd make something of yourself," she whispered. "I had to lose everything to find out what mattered," he said softly. Later that evening, he went home, not to a penthouse, but to a cozy apartment filled with books, plants, and laughter. His wife, Maya, whom he met at a nonprofit event, greeted him with a hug. Their son ran to him, wrapping his arms around Jonathan's legs. "Daddy, did you build another home today?" No, kiddo, he smiled, kneeling to his son's eye level. Today I helped someone build theirs. Epilogue, The Man Who Rose. Jonathan never became a billionaire again, but he became something better, a man of integrity, of purpose, of impact. He used his second chance not just to rebuild his life, but to rebuild others. His story became a beacon of hope in prisons, shelters, and broken homes across the country. Because sometimes it's not about what you lose, it's about what you choose to become after the fall.